Okay, so next we're going to go through section 3 of the listening, and like usual in IELTS, this is a section that sort of revolves around something academic and project related, so you've got to pretend you're like a university student doing some work. We've got questions 21 to 25. We've got to choose 3 answers from the box and write A to D next to questions 1 to 25. So we can see that it's probably going to be some kind of project that these students are talking about, and we've got to choose whether each section of their project is complete, needs to be reduced, so it's complete but it's too long, it's incomplete, it's not finished, or it needs to be deleted, so they need to get rid of it. All right, so it's a good thing to check through that and think about some quick paraphrases that they might use to try and throw you off picking the right answer. We've got choosing a title, so we're listening for the keyword title, the history of farming. I'm not quite sure what that would mean, but I'm sure in the context of the conversation it'll make sense. Gathering statistics, that's good. So have they gathered all the numbers or the numerical information they need? The slides of photographs, so this got probably keywords of photographs or photos, and choosing a local farm. So they might say selection instead of choosing, okay? So let's listen and see what's happening.
And answer questions 21 to 25.
Ah, Paul and Rachel, isn't it? Come in. Take a seat.
Good morning.
Hello.
So, how's the preparation for your presentation going?
Not bad.
Actually, I think it's going really well. I mean, we've still got lots to do, but what we have done is at a good stage, I think.
Good. So what are you going to be focusing on? What's the title of your presentation?
Well, we were thinking of something like farming in the West Coast.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And how will it be organized?
Well, we just thought we'd start with the history of farming over the last century.
Yes, just to give some background information.
That sounds interesting, but will you have enough time for that? Don't you think it would be better to focus on the main points straight away? How about doing an introductory slide stating what the presentation will be about?
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
You're right. Okay, we'll get on to that.
And what other areas have you prepared?
We've gathered some statistics from the library, but we need to get some more information from local sources.
Yes, we've been trying to contact some large agricultural industries, but have only heard from 2 so far.
Well, it might be an idea to decide how many you want to contact and set yourselves a deadline. These people are pretty busy, so you need to be persistent.
Okay, let's say 3 companies and 2 family-run businesses, and we need to hear back from them by the end of the term?
That sounds like a realistic target.
What we have done is prepared 40 slides of photographs of the area.
Yes, that took absolutely ages.
Great. Although that sounds like rather a lot to me. Your presentation is only going to be half an hour. I suggest you cut that down by at least half.
Oh, okay. We'll have to select the most relevant ones that will be connected with our statistics then.
Oh, and we've also chosen a local farm for our case study.
Yes, they've been really helpful.
That's fantastic.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation.
Okay, so that was pretty straightforward as we listen through. They mentioned most of the keywords quite clearly. The only sort of more complicated one was question 22, where they talk about the history of farming. So let's take a look at that one. So the guy, Paul, says, well, we thought we'd start with the history of farming over the last century. Then there's a bit of back and forth about that. And then the tutor says, but will you have enough time for that? Don't you think it would be better to focus on the main points straight away? And then Paul says, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, I mean, they've done it. It's complete. The tutor doesn't say that it needs to be cut down. He says that they should focus on something else instead. It's not incomplete, so really the work needs to be deleted. So the tutor is saying don't focus too much on the history, just get straight to the main points, okay? So he was not saying cut down on the history of farming. He's not saying reduce the amount of time. He's not saying only spend 1 minute on that. He's saying it's better just to focus on the main points. So he's basically telling them delete the history of farming, okay? So that's why it's delete and not reduce. And then when you talk about the slides of photographs, they say they've got like 40 slides of photographs that they're going to include. And then the tutor says, I suggest you cut that down by at least half. So to cut down, again, is a phrase that means to reduce something. For example, I'm trying to cut down on the amount of snacks I'm eating at night or something like that. Trying to reduce something. So that's how we know it's reduced. Okay, so let's move on to 26 to 30. So you can see that they've told us more about their fascinating research about farms. So you've got arable farms and pastoral farms. So I know arable farms are producing wheat and barley, so types of grain, flat and gently something land. Okay, so it's going to be gently, probably it's going to be some kind of, active, like, sloping land, flat and gently. I mean, my brain is saying sloping. That's the word that I know tends to describe farmland. So that would be my guess for what's going to come up in here. Okay, so you want to be using word-specific clues and hints to yourself about what you think is going to appear. Flat and gently sloping, gently dipping, gently irrigated, maybe something like that is preferable. Requires some type of soil. Probably something like fertile maybe would go in here. So some kind of adjective describing the soil. And then they talk about climates. Then we look at pastoral, sheep and something. Okay, so I'm guessing it's sheep and probably going to be some other type of animal. It's probably going to go here. Steep slopes possible. Soil quality is not an issue, as it is only needed to grow a type of grass. Okay, so we're looking for some kind of adjective that's going to describe the grass, or maybe a proper noun because it's going to describe something like, maybe they'll say porpoise grass or tall grass or something like that. Wet and windy climate is not an issue, as there is no danger of something crops. I'm not quite sure what word just off the top of my head would go there. Okay, but this is the key thing about IELTS, is going through and, if possible, taking a kind of guess about what you think might come up and making a note as you read along. Okay, so let's listen to the questions and let's see what they talk about.
So, apart from gathering statistics, what other information have you gathered?
Well, we're going to compare arable farms and pastoral farms. We're focusing on what they produce and what they need. So, the arable farms we're going to be looking at produce wheat and barley, and obviously do better in flat or gently sloping land with deep fertile soils.
Yes, and we've also discovered that pastoral farms, with mainly sheep and cattle, can work with steep slopes, particularly for sheep. And the quality of the soil isn't as important, as it only needs to provide nutrition for rough grasses and heather.
That's right. And what about the climate?
Okay. Well, we found out that arable farms tend to favour fairly sheltered land and not too wet a climate. Not sure if that can be helped in this country, though.
Unfortunately, no. And Paul, have you found out anything about pastoral farms, as far as the climate is concerned?
Yes, pastoral farms do better in cold, wet, windy climates than arable farms, as there isn't the issue of winds flattening crops, for example.
Well, looks like you've been doing the background reading as I suggested. Are you going to...
Okay, so that was quite tough in the fact that they gave you quite a lot of answers like straight after each other. Okay, so I was quite happy with myself. They did say sloping. I knew that was that was the only word in my head that really fit there. Sloping and fertile came very close together in her answers. So that would have been quite tough to pick up on. Again, cattle, we knew that was going to be a type of animal that goes in there. So she talks about for grass, rough grass. So this is kind of like a spelling. Are you able to spell some of sort of basic adjectives and nouns? And then the last one, flattening. So they say there isn't an issue of winds flattening crops. Okay, so there isn't an issue of, there is no danger of flattening crops. So again, we're listening for those key paraphrases of words in the questions. Okay, so that last section was quite tough. But the key thing to remember in IELTS is that you can get a decent score. You don't have to get every question perfect. And the point of IELTS is to include some really tricky questions that are difficult to answer. So never feel too discouraged if you miss one or two in a section. There's lots of chances to get points back in another section.